want to take a time out from talking strictly about Stan and Ollie and just to say this one thing about all three of these, and I'll get back to it.
Yeah, sure.
Other than the obvious subject matter, the one through thread with all three of these movies is how transformative some of these performances are. Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly, especially John C. Reilly in the big fat suit and makeup and everything. Like, I didn't see John C. Reilly anymore. I saw,
Mm-hmm.
I saw Ollie. I saw Oliver Hardy. With Robert Downey Jr.
You say that. I feel like Steve Coogan was the one who really disappeared into his role.
Yeah, especially some of the stage performances. Like, I can't get him sprinkling the salt on the egg out of my head, and like, oh my god, that's right off the television show. For a lot of people, Robert Downey Jr. will always be Iron Man. That he is now married to that role until he dies. But I still remember Robert Downey Jr. as the pickup artist. I was actually talking about Molly Ringwald today. I got up and I said, as I was starting to leave my office, I said, "All right, put your mittens on your kittens, and away we go." And of course, the one woman who is, I think, in her like late 20s, early 30s, who never knows what I'm talking about, was like, "What now? What are you doing to kittens?" And the other girl right next to her, who's a little bit older and seems a little bit more with it, goes, "Grease." I'm like, you get the star. But which then, if you've been on a podcast with me, you start with one thing, you just sort of, rush an egg into other stuff. So we went from that. We started talking about Olivia Newton-John, and eventually, I had just a couple of other actors and actresses named, but oh, Molly Ringwald. That's where I was going with this. We somehow landed on because she brought up 16 Candles. So I started talking about, like, I became like the autistic guy in the office. I'm like, let me tell you about all the Brad Pack stuff. So that's what got me to Robert Downey Jr. I was like trying to figure out, like, why am I telling him this? That's what it was. She mentioned 16 Candles and Molly Ringwald, and I said, had you ever seen The Pickup Artist? Which, by the way, when we eventually do a Robert Downey Jr. focus, one of those has to be The Pickup Artist, because his line about if I told you had the body of a tomato or some shit like that, would you hold it against me? I swear to God, it's like one of my, like, as a kid, I even appreciated how funny that line was as a pickup line. Anyway, back to Chaplin. Like, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. absolutely disappears, and he becomes Charlie Chaplin, who I knew nothing about before Chaplin. So, and then Renee Zellweger, absolutely, like, I wasn't familiar with old Judy Garland. The Judy Garland I know is from The Wizard of Oz, like most humans. But I'll tell you, I've seen Renee Zellweger in enough other movies that she completely disappeared into her role as Judy Garland in her 40s.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize it was Renee Zellweger until the credits.
Right? Like,
I knew I was sitting there watching it and I'm thinking, I have seen her in something. And then I saw the credits, I went, I have seen you in a whole lot of somethings, and holy shit, that was the best one yet.
Yeah, she looks like somebody's great aunt. You're like, that's not Renee Zellweger, that's Aunt Tootie. And you're like, wait, holy crap, that's Renee Zellweger. Just absolutely
astounding.
Like, it is, why do we watch movies? Because we like to see magic performed, and all three of these, there's magic. So back to Stan and Ollie. All right, so as I said, the movie details basically the last couple of months before Oliver Hardy dies. The framing of this movie is basically, and it's not totally historically accurate. I was reading about that right before the podcast started, but who cares about historical accuracy? The story goes like this. Steve Coogan wants the Charlie Chaplin treatment, and they say you ain't no Charlie Chaplin. So he ends up splitting from Oliver Hardy for a while. Hardy stays with Al Roach. Stan Laurel goes and does his own thing, and then years later, trying to get a Robin Hood movie made, they do a tour of England and Ireland stage show, kind of get their name back out there, get some money rolling, and it starts off not great. They perform to some half-empty halls, and then eventually they start making some appearances around town. They start getting an audience, and this all leads to a confrontation between these two, which basically goes. Oliver Hardy kind of points his finger in Laurel Stan Laurel's face and basically was like, "You're an empty guy. You're just a guy behind a typewriter. That's where you hide. You're not even a real person." And Stan Laurel's like, "But I loved us. I loved our comedy duo. I loved us as an act together." And Oliver Hardy says on the most heartbreaking thing this entire movie, "You may have loved us, but you didn't love me." And there's a couple of other lines he says which are absolutely outstanding. Something about like, "Yeah, I go to ball games with friends and we put Crowder on hot dogs. So what?" It's a conversation about, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's really a conversation about like
No,
one
no,
guy.
dude. This is one time I would actually encourage you to get a little bit sidetracked because I think there's some interesting stuff to dig into here.
Well,
By all means, if you want to get sidetracked.
it's so funny. And I don't necessarily mean just to call anybody, including you, out, but I long for collaboration. I love my collaborations with you over the years, as contentious as they may have been at times. I still love them, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. Same with Robert. Robert and I have loved and wanted to punch each other in the head almost in the same podcast. I've always loved my collaborations with Jesse. It is those collaborations that make this whole enterprise better. I said I don't want agreement the whole time. I want a conversation. I want a sharing of ideas. I want to be pushed. I want to be stretched, and I want to push and I want to stretch other people. And I love this format because it allows me to do that. Um, but so I see a lot of myself in Stan Laurel of like, no, it's the podcast that's the thing, and all of you kind of around me going, "Hey, we're all friends here. Could you calm the fuck down?" you know, I look at Oliver Hardy's thing about like, yes, I have other friends. I have a whole other life. This isn't all I do. It's something I have actually heard one or two people say to me over the years. And there's no right or wrong in that thing. It was two different perspectives. It was two longtime friends and partners kind of banging heads. And I love that line about you may have loved us, but you never loved me. And it's about like, hey, it's not about just the act, it's about the person. It's about the person
Well,
you're
okay.
engaging with.
If I may,
Yeah.
if I may veer off on an askew tangent from your tangent, if we're getting kind of meta talking about our chemistry, then I think that would kind of make me kind of like the Stan Laurel to your Stan Laurel, and I feel like,
Two
well, because
stands.
you and I are both, especially in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
because folks, for those of you who have just been listening the last few years, um, I was the Jason Mewes to this man's Kevin Smith. I was a volatile, breaking down pain in the ass that he had to rein in order to kind of have a wild man by his straight man. Like we were like an FM drive time jock duo. Um, like someone that I would hear on The Rock here in Kansas City or on 98.3 The Buzz
Yeah,
back in Columbia, North Carolina.
we were the Opie and Anthony of movie reviews.
Exactly. But the thing is, then over the years, I started to kind of edge more and more toward kind of Mark's same page. And I started to find more and more of kind of a kindred mindset with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we kind of got to this place where, not only do we have the podcast, but I'm always thinking about, I'd like to blog about this. I'd like to learn more about that. I'd like to learn how to do this down the road. Why don't I try that? There isn't really much of kind of that Oliver Hardy contented hedonism in me. And I know it sounds like I'm calling him out for that, and how dare I? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. I mean, some people just, that's what it takes for them to be happy. They're good with the little things in life. My best friend in the world, who sadly is in the hospital recovering. By the way, love you, Jeremy. Please kick out at 2 at least one more time. No selling, buddy. Um, you know, he's, I guess he would be kind of the Hardy to my Laurel, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to get out and really drink life to the lees, go into the woods and live deliberately. Um, Jeremy would kind of be, if I'm going into the woods to live deliberately, Jeremy would be the one content to wait in the clearing with the tent, the beer, the Pepsi, the cigarettes, and, and some Sinatra. Um, but it's just different strokes from different folks. And I mean, even in their comedy, I think one thing you could clearly tell about Laurel and Hardy was they not only knew exactly who each other was, even if it brought them into conflict sometimes, but they still loved them for it, and they loved themselves for who they were.
So the fight so it ends with him saying you may have loved us, but you didn't love me.
Yeah.
And they continue to the tour a little bit more, but eventually Oliver Hardy collapses, and he's basically told if you continue to perform, you're going to end up dead. And so initially he retires. He's like, I'm quitting the tour. There's a suggestion to maybe go on with a different comedian. And while it's considered at first, at some point Stan says, no, I'm not doing this. Not without Ollie. And if anyone's just like, could you do it a few more parallels to your own podcast, you egomaniac? Yeah, I will. I'll do one more. Um, it's been suggested a couple of times, especially recently, that Robert is considering not wanting to do Damn You Hollywood anymore. And I keep saying, like, I can't make you do this. I'm in life and in relationships and in my house and in my podcast. If you don't want to be here, go go find your happiness elsewhere. I'm not keeping you. But he's said to me on a couple of occasions, especially over the years, like, I'm not going to do this forever. I need to go do something else. And I said, okay, well, when you're done, we're done. Like, not as friends, but like, when you're done with Damn You Hollywood goes away forever. And he was like, get the fuck out of here. You'll find Alexis or, you know, Dorian and his 87 people that he likes to bring with him, or, like, he's like, you'll just have a rotating group of co-hosts. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Once you're gone, that's the end. I mean, I may continue to do something else, something entirely different, but Damn You Hollywood is Mark and Robert. It's been Mark and Robert from day one. It'll die Mark and Robert. And I don't want to go on and do that podcast, that format without him, period. And I won't. And that's where Stan gets to with Laurel and Hardy. He's like, I don't want to do this tour without him. I don't want to do this act without him. At least in the movie. And so eventually Ollie decides to finish the tour at the very least, which they do. And they show you one final performance, and you can see Ollie, like, just sweating. Like, this is clearly affecting his health. He's a big dude, and this is, the early 1900s or mid
Yeah.
1900s. Yeah. So, uh, shortly after that performance, he dies. And shortly before that, there's a discussion about the movie that Laurel was trying to make. And he was like, yeah, there's no movie. We can't get financing for it. It's not happening. And it's funny because Ollie's like, yeah, I already knew that. And Stan's like, but for why? Why would you let me believe you knew? And they kind of do this who's on first thing, which is really funny. And he was just like, what would be my line here? The thing I love, I'm just going to get into my thoughts on Stan and Ollie. The thing I love about this movie, and again, I love collaboration. I love, you know, when Sean and I put together ideas for, to do our movie reviews. When Dorian and I talk about, like, what can we do to make this better? When Robert's not in the mood and we can actually have, like, a good conversation about how we can make this better, that's what gives me energy. That's what gives me the fuel to keep going. I love that kind of collaborative talk. Everything Jesse and I do together when we're talking about how to make these podcasts, like, especially lately playing with artificial intelligence, I love all that stuff. There's a lot of this movie is them coming up with script ideas, kind of talking in the, well, what would be my line if we were doing this on stage? Like, it's this kind of conversations that we all have with each other. I see in them, and I'm like, that's home for me. That makes me feel seen and heard. I see us and them and us. Believe it or not, um, it's a very quiet movie. Like
It
I
really
said,
is.
like I said, like the biggest like action, most like contentious set piece is the argument that I keep referring to, and Ollie never raises his voice. He kind of he gets kind of he kind of harumps and like, yeah, and we put, you know what? Yeah, I got friends, and we put sauerkraut on our hot dogs. So what? It's about as loud as he gets. And Steve Coogan's portrayal of Stan Laurel doesn't even get that loud, and he's like pissed off in like half the movie. You know, the opening bit where he's like, "Why? You know, what's Chaplin got that I ain't got?" A lot, sir, so much. But we'll get to that in a few minutes.